Welcome, everybody. My name's Gary Fowler. It is great to be here today, and I've got some exciting guests. I'm the CEO, president, and co founder of GSD Venture Studios, a premier AI and quantum venture studios, helping companies from around the world go global using Silicon Valley as a port. And it's with a great deal of admiration and respect that I introduce my friend Fabio Scasavigliani. And Fabio, if I made your name wrong, it's a long one. So anyhow, Fabio and I have spent quite a bit of time together over the last year, different panels, VC panels from around the world. He's got an incredible background from University of Chicago to working in the Middle East as an investor, as an analyst, etc. So with great pleasure, I'd like to introduce my friend Fabio. Hello, Fabio.
Gary, it's always a great pleasure to be with you and with your audience. You make my day.
You make my day too, and I got to tell you, I love your haircut. I told you in the green room. For a second I didn't recognize you. I thought, oh my God, who's this guy?
This is my, New Year's resolution. I'll join the Marines Corps. So I started with a slight change to my physical appearance before training camp.
I guess I might have to say yes, sir, huh?
Yeah.
So, Fabio, how do you go from, so you went to Luis Guido Carli University and economics. And how in the world do you go from there to University of Chicago? What happened? It was like you wake up one day and say, "Oh, I would like the winter weather in Chicago," or what?
No, if I had known about the winter weather in Chicago, I would have stayed in Rome, believe me. I was totally unaware. I was completely misinformed because they told me that University of Chicago has great fraternities. And then when I got there, I realized that they had lied shamelessly to me.
For penguins. For penguins.
Yeah, exactly.
They didn't tell you the rest of the story, though.
No.
You know, it's funny. Whenever you go to Chicago, they talk about the restaurants and the pizza, and they talk about the lake in the summertime, but they never talk about the winter. The only thing is they say the Windy City, which is great for sailing. But I won't tell you the rest of the story.
So, believe me, you don't want to sail in the middle of January on the lake.
I mean, if you're sailing in the middle of January, it's with an ice boat on the river or the
exactly,
lake.
A mini Titanic on the.
So what did you decide? I mean, how did you go back through? And where did you grow up? Where were you from originally in Italy?
I'm originally from a small town up on the mountains between, say, Rome and Naples. It's a fairly, remote place, but it had a very good high school, one of the oldest high school in Italy, certainly in the south of Italy, which was not linked to the church, so it was not a seminary or a school for priests or for ecclesiastics. And so this was a very small high school, like 75 students. In total.
Now that's a small high school.
Yeah, exactly.
Were you all in the same room at the same time, or
No, not at that point.
It's like,
we're like
sixth grade,
12 students. Yeah. No, it was a donation of a rich man to the youth of the time of this small town. And it was a donation dating back to 1750, more or less. So it was a very good school. I managed to get into this private university in Rome, and then in my third year in college, a PhD from MIT was appointed Minister of the budget. It's like was like a branch of the Ministry of Finance, of the Treasury.
Mhm.
And he called from the US all his former classmates
Mhm.
from Italy and from other countries. So these people came to be part of the team at the ministry, and they were teaching at my university as well, my college. And so they, this group of economists pushed me to go abroad and study. They didn't specifically indicate Chicago. I applied to, I don't know, 20 schools all over the places. And then, the best one that accepted me was University of Chicago. And that's how I started my career as an economist.
Wow, and how many years did you spend in Chicago?
5 years.
And this, five
A lot.
I gotta say this: the summers are really beautiful in Chicago. It is really beautiful. People appreciate it, and I guess for part of the, I was there.
They're fairly hot. It's not like the Mediterranean
Right.
beaches. It's very cold in the summer. In the winter, and fairly hot in the summer. So in Chicago you have like 3 months out of 12 where the weather is pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
But those were the years, the magic years of the University of Chicago. Year after year, my professors were getting the Nobel Prize, and I studied with some incredible economists. I mean, the economists who wrote the history of economics and economic theory. So, despite the cold weather, I enjoyed the
You didn't have a lot else to do, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. It was like home and library, classroom, home, library. So that was my life.
So what made you decide, you worked for the International Monetary Fund, you went down through that, you worked for governments. I read about Oman, you were doing work in the Middle East. How did you make the transition? So how did you go like, I'm going to the IMF and then I'm going to Oman? It's like, what was it like? How did you make the transition?
No, the IMF came to recruit on campus, so it was one of the many institutions, academic and non-academic, that would recruit PhDs from the economics department. And in those years, when I went on the job market, there was a combination of events. Most academic institution in the US had stopped hiring because there was a crisis. It was an economic crisis. Now it's almost forgotten, but it was the savings and loans crisis, which costed George Bush the first his presidency.
Mm-hmm.
And so the budgets of most state university had been slashed. So the main employer of economists that year was the IMF, because with the fall of the Soviet Union, they needed a lot of people to be sent to the former Soviet Union, the former Warsaw Pact countries, to reestablish the market economy to save them from bankruptcy. So that's how I landed a job at the IMF, and I worked in the research department the first year. The second year, I was sent to Croatia during the civil war in Yugoslavia. So
Was somebody like you or what? Hey, as long as they didn't put a target on your back, you know.
No. I managed to survive.
Well, yeah, I
And
guess you made
actually, it was a great experience. It was
I
a
guess you must have
great
made some
professional
great
experience.
friends at the IMF. Huh? They said, I know somebody that wants to go.
No.
Hey, and listen, we sent him to Chicago already. Let's send him out here.
Let's see if he's a tough guy,
We're
like
gonna
he
see.
says. You know.
And listen, he doesn't mind. It's going to be a lot of fun. Just talk
Yeah,
about how
exactly.
beautiful the coastline is and that kind of thing. Wow, that's how was that? How is it like when there's a war going on? How in the world was it like normal? And how did you like work?
Incredible. I mean, I had already had some experience of countries at war. I had been in Nicaragua in the early 80s, so I knew how it feels like when you live in a country at war. And
Hey,
believe it or
Fabio,
not,
is there anything we need to know about? I was there. I was in Iran. You know, I've been around a few places.
No, I've been well. Then afterwards, I've been to Sudan, Iraq, Lebanon, Israel, and Palestine. I mean West Bank. So,
With the same people
uh,
that sent you to Croatia, the ones that sent you over there?
no, well, to Sudan, I went for the IMF, and those were the years of the civil war. I mean, you couldn't get out of Khartoum. In other countries, no. In Iraq, I went for the Oman Investment Fund. We wanted to buy an oil service company. So I went there, in armored cars. I would move around, with with 5-6 people, with Kalashnikov, taking me around. But no, the situation in Zagreb,
Well, I
because
mean, do
that's
you
where I.
like that? Was that it? Was it? I mean, it must be really interesting to be in a situation where you have an emerging economy and you got war going around you to get things moving. It must be pretty interesting, right? Because you're on the ground floor.
Oh yeah, it was an incredible experience. By the way, when the first mission to Zagreb, the country had experienced hyperinflation. Inflation was like 100%. 1,000% per
Wow.
year. And the governor of the central bank all of a sudden stopped printing money. Like, said, okay, from now on, forget it. If you want to do business in Croatia, you use Deutschmark, because there was a huge expatriate community of Croatians in Germany, mostly. So they were sending remittances to their families. And the governor of the central bank said, well, we need to get these marks, German marks, into the economy. Let's stop with the money printing. He changed the currency, introduced this kuna, and inflation went from 1,000% to negative in 15 days.
Really? Now, wait a minute. When it's 1,000% inflation, how in the world do you like buy a loaf of bread? What do you do? Take a wheelbarrow, and how do you like it?
Yeah, as soon as you get any bank or any money, you rush to the store and try to buy whatever you find there. That's how it works. During the German Weimar Republic, people would use cars to get with a bunch of banknotes, like to the
And
store.
how was it like the attitude of the people when you're dealing with it? I know in Russia, when the ruble got devalued and it dropped like 50%, it was unbelievable. People would go out to the stores and they were buying like 5 big screen TVs. I've never seen anything like it. Buying like these goods. They were cameras and TVs. I even bought a watch, right? I mean, it was like, because it was still at the old ruble price, and I figured I could at least hedge some of my bet. But how is it like that? How do people survive? I mean, when you were in there, And then you said in 15 days it changed. How was that? Must have been like a shock to people.
Yeah, no, it was. Well, I mean, the hyperinflation in Croatia wasn't something totally, new, because Yugoslavia, before its collapse, had experienced inflation of like 100%. So the phenomenon was already well entrenched. But with the civil war, inflation skyrocketed. So it was like an acceleration of the inflationary process. And so people already knew to a large extent how to deal with it, but certainly it was a hit to their savings, to their standard of living. And
Well, I mean, it's like every day it changes, right? It's like Forrest Gump. It's like a box of chocolates. You don't know what you're going to get tomorrow.
yeah, then most people had Deutschmark, so they would use it for, if you want to buy a house, you could only buy it with foreign currency. You wouldn't be able to buy anything with dinar at the time. And Zagreb, which is a city of million plus people, had 400,000 refugees from the areas occupied by the Serbs. So it was not only an economic emergency, it was also, a social and humanitarian catastrophe. But you wouldn't see a single person begging in the streets, for example. So all these people had, displayed a dignity which was admirable. And
Wow.
So it was an interesting experience. By the way, the economists there were remarkably good. The whole team at the central bank, first-class economists. I'm still in touch with them after 30 years, and you could really learn something from them.
So how did you go from that? I mean, you and I have been on a lot of these VC panels around the world together. How did you go from, Iraq, Sudan, Croatia, e-minted? How did this work? It's like, how did you make a transition and investing and how did that go about?
No, I don't think I didn't experience any problem. I mean, I'm very flexible, but when I left the IMF to go work for the European Central Bank right before the introduction of the euro, so I was there when the euro was created, and that was another extremely important experience for me, because I witnessed the historical event. And when I left the IMF, people would say, "Oh, but you have such a great career. Why do you want to go to the European Central Bank?" I said, "Well, I want to witness something that will go down in the history books, because for good or for bad, if it's a success or if it's a failure, it would be something that people will speak of for the next couple of centuries." The IMF, it's a very interesting place. We deal with a lot of crises, but most of these crises will be a footnote in the history books, with a few exceptions, obviously. So for me, the introduction of the euro, to see how from 12 different currencies, or 11 different currencies, you could create like the second most important currency in the world, was really being
Must
part
have
of
been really
history.
cool being part of that. It must have been really
Exactly.
interesting. So
Yeah.
what do what are you doing exactly in e-minted today? What are you doing? Are you investing? What are you looking at?
Today, after a long experience at the Oman Investment Fund, which is the sovereign wealth fund of the Sultanate of Oman, I became a partner of an investment bank in New York, which is called Golden Eagle. And what I'm doing is I'm building a bridge between the innovative companies in Europe and elsewhere, Middle East or I don't know, maybe even South America, North Africa, and the American capital market. Because in America, you have the most vibrant capital market, but it is, in a sense, still very concentrated on the domestic economy. So the VC funds in the US deal mostly with Silicon Valley or the other clusters, I don't know, around Boston, maybe Austin for artificial intelligence, Washington and Maryland for defense-linked ventures, and there is a wave of innovation in Europe which is still inaccessible, or let's say it is still difficult to access for the financial institutions in the US. So I'm building this bridge. Often we list companies on the over-the-counter market, because it's the stock market where you can still find money to grow. Listing, in the minds of many people is the final step of a long journey that starts with the crowdfunding, angels, Series A, B, C, pre-IPO, and then you list on NASDAQ. The OTC is an alternative to this fundraising through funds, private equity funds, friends and families, and it is really effective in channeling resources to innovative companies. And so, by the way, the listing rules are very favorable for foreign companies, and so that's what we take advantage of.
So you're using the money is primarily from the US then? Is that what you're saying?
It's primarily from the US. The companies that we bring are, let's say, half from the US, half from the rest of the world.
How do you find?
I focus mostly on European companies.
Fabio, how do you find those companies? So do they come to you, or do you search for them? How does it? Is it word of mouth?
I have a fairly popular persona on social media, so I don't even need to search. They come to me most.
Oh, that's
most
great.
Of the time. Yeah,
that's fantastic. So, what are you looking for? What kind of? So, I have an audience around the world. So we're Africa, Asia. What are you looking for? What kind of company would be a great company for you today?
A great company in general is a company which has an intellectual property unique or very rare. It is disruptive. In other words, it changes the rules of the game. To me, for example, e-commerce is not such a big deal. I mean, we have seen everything. We have all sorts of websites that sell all sorts of merchandise or services. To me, that's past tense. It's not innovation. I want to, ideally, it will create a market or will greatly expand a market. It will be difficult to replicate. So these are the main elements that I'm looking for
And how much
in a proposal.
do they generally have revenue or not? And how much do you invest in them? How does it work in terms of investment, that kind of thing?
Well, it really depends because, for example, you have biotech companies that have discovered or they're working on some new drug, new treatment, new device, and they need to finance the testing phases, phase 2 and phase 3. So they don't have any revenue at all. And
Mm-hmm.
they will not see any revenue for maybe 3, possibly 5 or 6 years. So these are the the riskiest propositions. Otherwise, you have companies that have made a breakthrough. They have developed a prototype. For example, I have companies that have developed, microscopic lasers to modify material or devices, and that's something very, very innovative. The applications are still, in their infancy. I've seen a company that is trying to test, to get approved, a sort of a helmet which gives you the possibility of measuring objectively pain.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Nowadays, if you go to a doctor and say, "Oh, I'm in pain," he doesn't have any way to ascertain whether you're saying the truth or not. So this has to do with the opioid crisis, with a lot of lost days for illnesses, fake claims to insurance companies. So it's really a game changer if that kind of devices gets approved. It will be a new beginning for many branches of medicine and healthcare. So that's what we were looking for. That's the kind of companies we like. And what we do, we take them, we assist them in listing. We have also an asset management branch. In particular, we have a fund for innovation. So there are obviously Chinese walls, but when our team decides that a venture is interesting, the asset managers look at it, and usually they participate in the fundraising. So it's really an exciting time to be in this sort of environment, because we are on the cusp of you say that all the time, we're on the cusp of a great wave of innovation. You are the prophet of artificial intelligence, and exactly. It will
I don't know
be
if I'm the prophet, but it's like,
well, the high priest, at least.
The high priest, maybe the low priest, I don't know. But I mean, it's coming. There's changes taking place, that's for sure. And we kid around about Chicago, but on the other side, I know Chicago's working really hard to bring startups to Chicago, and there's specifically for the underserved, and to do the right thing. And we do see companies coming out of Silicon Valley and relocating to places like Chicago and Miami and Austin and New York. I mean, it's interesting how this transition's taking place. So, all kidding aside, I mean, some of the brightest people I've met are from Chicago, right? They, and the University of Chicago is, world-class institution. So there's incredible talent there. It's a matter of getting to that talent, helping them go global, and really pulling it out and finding those diamonds in the rough, wherever they are, right?
Absolutely. That's very true. By the way, I don't know how many people know that the atomic bomb, like the first controlled nuclear reaction, was done at the University of Chicago,
underneath the football field at the Manhattan Project.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So you wonder why you
chief-
glow. You wonder why you get a little glowy when you go near the football field. You know, it's kind of interesting, right? The bomb was done underneath a football field where there's a lot of people around. Anyhow, listen, we're coming to
By the
top.
way, the guy who did the experiment, who was an Italian, Enrico Fermi, had been warned. I mean, he had been, explicitly forbidden from doing anything like that because they were afraid that he would blow up the entire city, and he did it nevertheless.
It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, he said, "Oh, fuck."
You know, you guys are all the same. Oman, Sudan, Iraq. Wherever there's a little action, kind of make it a little dicey. Listen, so we're at the top of the hour, Fabio. Where can people, closing thoughts, and where can people get a hold of you?
I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and if they want to send me an email, they can. My email address is fabio.scacciavillani. So my first name dot my last name @gmail.com. So I'm one of the most reachable persons in the world. And if somebody wants to connect with me for any reason, I'll be very happy.
Yeah, Fabio's an all-around good guy, genius, understands technology from all around the world. Get a hold of him. Fabio, thanks for joining my show today. And stay tuned, everybody, for part 2. Thanks, Fabio, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
It's been a pleasure and an honor to be with you, Gary. Keep up with the good work.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. All right, so we're at part 2, and an incredible investor, Jason Jacobson from Propellant, from Chicago, originally from Wisconsin, I believe, and it's great to have him on my show today. So, Jason, how you doing? It's good to see you.
Yeah, great to be here, Gary. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
So, I got a question for you. There's one thing I was looking through your profile, and it said Master Connector. And what's a master connector?
So my entire career, even starting in college, I've always been a relationship builder. And so I've spent a lot of time building good relationships and then just connecting people together almost on a daily basis. I never asked for anything in return. I always pay it forward. And I've always found ways to connect people together based on their needs or who I think they should meet. And it's really allowed me to build my network. And so I very rarely leave a conversation without finding a way to assist someone, whether personally or connecting them to someone that could be helpful.
Oh, that's excellent. So how do you go from Wisconsin to Chicago? And, you were at, you got your MBA at DePaul and then Propellant. What was that journey like?
So I'm from Wisconsin, just a small town outside of Milwaukee. Went to school at University of Wisconsin. It was a very logical place to go, considering I was only an hour and a half away. Great in-state school, great tuition, all those types of things. And I started my career actually in real estate. I had a degree in finance and real estate. And Chicago, being the biggest closed city, was a logical place to go, especially for real estate. This was more than 20 years ago. And it was a really good town, still is, but back then, really good town for real estate. And again, I never really thought about leaving the Midwest. A lot of people here in the Midwest stay in the Midwest. And I this was during the first tech boom of the late 90s. So I got really caught up in that world and made the switch a few years into the entrepreneurship and investor communities and navigated my way through a lot of different programs. I was on the front lines supporting entrepreneurs, managing, facilitating a lot of programs. And capital raising was always something that was top of mind for entrepreneurs. So found myself helping companies raise capital, connecting them to investors. But along the way, I kept on building relationships and realized that entrepreneurs need more than just capital. While they may lead with capital, there's a lot more needs than that. So found my way connecting entrepreneurs to a lot of different resources and continually led to one opportunity after the other and built a pretty sizable network, which allowed me then to get into the venture capital industry and ultimately started my own fund. So been in and around the space for 20 years.
So tell us a little bit about Propellant. What are you doing today, and what kind of companies you're investing in? How big is your fund?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're focused on the Midwest. It's a really untapped opportunity. There are a lot of great companies here, a lot of great entrepreneurs, and not enough early stage capital here. We've had a lot of funds started over the last several years, but we need more capital. So we find our sweet spots in the pre-seed and early seed stage where there's less VCs coming in. We focus on co-investing alongside other investors. We can lead those rounds. Generally, we're one of the first professional investors or the first professional investor in the round. And so that's our sweet spot. And we're focused throughout the Midwest in B2B industries such as healthcare, future work, fintech, edtech, and supply chain. We are a great B2B region, and we have world-class universities here, over 100 of the Fortune 500 companies here, a lot of great talent. And so B2B is really the area that we believe is some of the greatest opportunities. In fact, Chicago has the highest investor returns in any city across the country in the U.S., and the Midwest has the highest returns out of any regions. There really are great opportunities here. And so we're raising a
Jason, why is that?
It's because so part of it is founders here focus on building a business model with revenue creation and profitability. Go figure, right? So they don't need as much capital early on. They're bootstrapping, have some early stage capital. By the time they get to that phase, the bigger VCs come in from the coast and jack up the valuations so that earlier investors, assuming there's an exit, have a pretty good return on the money that came in early. We have other great features, benefits in the Midwest. Cost of living is lower, world-class talent. We have one of the highest concentrations of IT talent coming out of any universities across the country. We have the second concentration of universities per capita outside of Boston. And we have, as I mentioned, we have the third largest CPS public school system in the country. As I mentioned, over 100 Fortune 500 companies. So we have a lot of great things happening here. We have a lot of R&D money going into companies as well through universities. And so a lot of great things happening here, but a lot of it is focused on building companies for revenue and profitability. And then they get higher valuations as they get bigger.
Why hasn't it happened sooner in Chicago?
So we have had successes, dating back to the first tech boom, but it's not consistent successes. We've had a lot more things happening over the last 7 years. A lot of, we don't have as many serial entrepreneurs here, and we don't have as many of the successful entrepreneurs staying here to build their next companies. Many times they leave and go on the coast. Let's say the West Coast is a common place. So we need more people that have had consistent successes to stay here, build new companies, invest in other companies. And that's really happening more and more now. We have so many local efforts here. And a lot of the efforts across the country, whether it's other VCs or support programs, are definitely taking notice of Chicago and the Midwest. So there's a lot of momentum now. And, it's a great place to be building a company and looking for investment opportunities.
What about the companies that are in Silicon Valley? Are you seeing any of we hear about Austin, we hear about Miami. I know I spoke with Fabio about it a bit. How are you seeing any of the folks coming into Chicago, coming back to the roots or relocating there? And what do they give them? Why would they want to come? What does Chicago give them in terms of, are there any incentives to relocate their businesses there?
Yeah, so it definitely is. One of the biggest things is the cost of living is just so much less. It's, up to 3 times less than it is out west. And so, 2 to 3 times less. So people can build a business at a much smaller amount, whether it's employees, whether it's office space, where it's living space. And especially if these founders are from the Midwest, they have roots here. So why not come back and build their company in a more cost-effective way, especially now with the lockdowns and the remote work? It makes a lot of sense. So you can be a big fish in Chicago, relatively small pond compared to out west. And it's a very tight-knit community here. We still have, Chicagoland is still, lots of people, but it's still a fairly tight-knit community. So we know each other, and you can really make a name for yourself and really help the ecosystem. So it's really just the cost of living is a key factor. Also, we're a fairly central location in the country, and you've got the airports, which O'Hare is one of the busiest airport in the world. So you've got that. You can go across the country fairly easily by being located here. So it really, it depends on the motivation of the founder, but a lot of times it really comes down to the cost is more effective to be here in the Midwest.
I was reading in Palo Alto, like an average house is over $2 million, right? I mean, when I mean average small house, not big, 1,200, 1,400 square feet. So you're saying it's 3 times cheaper being in Chicago for that house?
Absolutely. I mean, 1,200 square foot house would be well under $1 million. I mean, depending on location, it could be the suburbs, right, the city, but definitely it would be a lot less. My brother lives in Hillsboro, outside of San Francisco. Mm-hmm. Similar size house, bigger yard. It's about 5 times the amount of what my house costs, and I live in the suburbs of Chicago. So he obviously lives in a high demand area, but the fact is, big difference, right? And so salaries, it may not be quite the same for salaries, but cost of living definitely with a housing cost is significant.
What about taxes? How about personal income tax? What is Illinois charge in terms of tax? Is it the same 9-12% as California, or is it less?
It's a good question. I don't have that answer. I think it's probably similar, but it's the housing taxes that are we have a pretty big housing tax here. Mm-hmm. Some people go across the state to Wisconsin because it's cheaper. Actually, and there are signs, used to be billboards right over the border. Come here, come move here. It's cheaper to live here, cheaper to do business here.
Huh.
Yeah. So there, just north of the border, we've got some towns, and from where I live, and there's definitely some business activity there. And
taxes are a big thing now, right? So they look at taxes, they look at the access to capital. How about capital, the access to capital? I mean, one thing about the Valley, being in Silicon Valley, is that 5 minutes from my office, you can go to Sand Hill Road and you can find a lot of money from places all over the world, whether it's a family office or VCs or angel investors, et cetera. What about in Chicago? I mean, how it's about the access to capital, right? And then the valuations. People complain outside of the Silicon Valley, the valuations aren't good. What's it like?
So we definitely have capital here, and there's more capital sources all the time. There's been a lot of micro funds that have been created the last 5-6 years. There's more angels that are visible in terms of providing, guidance and, of course, capital. There's some big VCs in town. There's a lot of family offices here. I'd say it's kind of spread out. It's suburbs and city. There's not one particular central location. Mm-hmm. And we have a couple spots where you have several VCs that are office together. but it's pretty spread out. And we do not have a sandhill rolled at all where you can just line up and go VC to VC. But we have, most people are very accessible here. And so you just have to get a good introduction. Many of them hold open office hours as well. So you just have to know where to find them. But it's, there's a lot of capital. We have a lot of old money here too.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of old families with family money that are investing in funds or investing directly into companies. They're doing more and more of that. But there's plenty of capital here. It's still a smidgen compared to out west, but there's still quite a bit. And Chicago is the epicenter of the Midwest, so a lot of the activity is in Chicago. But there's other pockets that are really doing well too. You've got Minneapolis that's got a lot of health tech. You've got other areas. You got St. Louis, Milwaukee, Columbus. I mean, there's some Detroit even. Auto tech. I mean, there's a lot of things happening, but a lot of it still comes out of Chicago just because of the size and the scale of who we have here.
Oh, that's interesting. So what, so if you look at it, what's the prognosis? Look over the next 5 years. What do you think is going to happen in Chicago based on what's happening now? How do you see that? And, I know I talk to startups every single day from all over the world, as you know, on the panels that we're on, but it's interesting to hear them. I mean, they're really looking for the support and, what kind of support, not just financial support. Is there any infrastructure? Do they have events they can attend, pitching events, a lot of them? And so do you see that increasing over the next 5 years? Is it good now? I mean, what do you see? Are they really with open arms? Because I know some of the challenges you hear communities and cities talk about it, but in reality, their arms aren't open, or it's, the money's not smart. So they don't understand the mentality so with some family offices, right? They don't understand the mentality of investing in an AI startup. They don't understand where you can have hockey stick kind of growth in a company. Their thing is, well, we build it over time and it's intergenerational, multi-generational wealth. But when it comes down to it, these are really the ways that, the next Apple, the next Twitter, the next Google are being created today. So how is it? I mean, I guess for the first part, do they have that kind of open mentality that they understand that, this is a whole different paradigm in terms of investing? It's not a brick and mortar store or apartment building. Do they have that? And two is, do you think they're sophisticated enough and understand it enough to be able to really be that smart money for the startup?
Yeah, we have a lot of efforts to boost up the ecosystem here, and people have been doing it for many years. It's recognized that, we want to grow as a tech community. Now we have so many other industries here. We're not just tech. We have manufacturing, food, obviously B2B tech. We've got a lot of different industries here, healthcare, biotech. A lot of it stems down to tech, and that's where a lot of investors put their money into. But yeah, we're a fairly open community. There are groups of entrepreneurs and investors that have put together different efforts to create the excitement, to boost the ecosystem. We have something called 1871 that came out about 7 years ago that is the U.S.'s largest, called incubator or co-working space for the tech community. So they keep on expanding. It's a nonprofit, had a lot of state money put into it, had some wealthy individuals put money into it, and it houses hundreds of entrepreneurs. Investors have space there. Universities have space there. So they've built an ecosystem there. But ultimately, it's a co-working space. But people have office hours. Some Techstars houses their program out of there. So it's a collaborative hub where a lot of people, when they come to Chicago, they come to that location. But we have many other locations. That's just the largest. There's a lot of events that happen there as well. And there's a lot of different things. Every night of the week, you can attend an event or multiple events. So there's a lot of, we have also, Chicago has the highest amount of female founder startups in the country. So there's efforts for underserved, even more efforts now, as we all know, for underserved and underrepresented founders. So we have a group called P33 that is an effort that was put together by a lot of entrepreneurs and investors around making Chicago a tech, one of the top tech areas in over a 15-year plan. They've been around for a couple years. They just created a fund to invest in Latino and female founders, and so we have other dedicated funds like that. So there's really a lot of programs here to support everything, and people are very open. I mean, you can contact anyone almost anytime, and most of the time you'll get a response, or you can easily find how to connect to someone through the community. As I said, it's very tight knit. I run the Founder Institute chapter here in Chicago, which I've been doing for 10 years. It's a global program. We were in the first 20 cities. Now it's in 200 cities around the world. And I do a lot of events to bring the community together. I do a monthly Founder Night Out where we bring entrepreneurs, investors, and other people together. Since the pandemic, we went virtual. Now we have a 3D event, a very immersive event where you have your own avatar walking around, controlling your own experience to meet people one-on-one. We have a startup showcase. We have investors, as I mentioned, come. So I personally put a lot of events on to support the community, and there's many other people that do that. So yeah, it's definitely supportive, and people are open. And Techstars brings people from other parts of the country into Chicago, hopes that they'll stay here. So of course, also they support the local entrepreneurs as well. So there's plenty of efforts to try to bring people here and to boost it up, but also just to boost up what's already here.
That's fantastic. So what kind of investments are you making right now?
Yeah, so we have a few areas of interest, but we obviously will go outside of that, but B2B is our focus. So we invested in a future work company. It's actually the 3D virtual environment that I just mentioned. They're actually a graduate of the Founder Institute here in Chicago. We've done events with them since April last year.
Where are they from? Because I know another company that's like that from Canada, actually.
Chicago.
They're from Chicago originally, yeah?
Yep.
Interesting. Because there was another company that's doing the same kind of thing, and they were talking about they actually showed me. They've got the avatars. You can see them sitting in the seat, and then you can see if a professor or a speaker's up front. I don't know if yours is the same, but it was fascinating actually to see. It's almost like moving into the virtual, totally submerged, intrigued, and inside the virtual world.
Yeah, they can set it up that way. It depends on the organizer, what they want to do. We do a event where we have a startup booths. We have sponsor booths. We have a virtual bar, of course. We have table topic discussions.
No,
so we've created
a virtual bar.
Sorry, what was that?
How does a virtual bar work? I'm real interested.
Well, I mean, there's a bartender there. You go and get a drink, and that's it. You can pick the type of drink you want, and then you carry a big drink around with you in the event.
So you go into the place, you get a drink from the bartender. So you navigate over, but it's not a real drink. It's a drink. Well, it's real in the virtual world. And then what do?
Yeah.
Sit around and talk, and how's your drink? And
yeah, man, you're just carrying it in your hand as you walk around. You just have it in your hand. It's another prop, so you can change your hair. You can change your clothes. You can put a hat on. You can put glasses on. You can put a mask on. They've got all these different ways to customize your avatar. You can set the drink down as well, and then that once you're done with it. So it's really interesting experience. We helped create the environment that our events are in since April of last year. Our last in-person event was in February of last year, and then April we went virtual, and it was very unique and different than what anyone was used to. So we've done now 9 of them, and we have another one coming up as well.
That sounds cool. That sounds really cool. So we're coming to the top of the hour. What are your final closing thoughts, and how can people reach you?
Yeah, I'm very bullish on the Midwest, and there's a lot of great opportunities here, not only to start a company, but also as an investor to find great, reasonably priced, reasonable valuations. So I'm excited about what we're going to see here going forward in the Midwest. So I'm excited to build the fund and to find great opportunities. People can find me on LinkedIn, as well as my email, jason@propellant.vc, propellant.vc.
Well, I want to thank you, Jason. I appreciate you taking time out of a busy schedule to join my show today. It's great to be here. So, audience, I hope you enjoyed it. we'll stay tuned because we'll be back next week with another exciting episode as GSD Venture Studios presents Silicon Valley AI and Tech. So thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it. And I'll see you soon, Jason.
Great. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.